Well, joining us now is some people from the Orange County Fire Authority. That's Steve Concialdi and Teri Merritt. Thanks for joining us today on the program.
Thank you.
You know, it's getting to be that fall time. Everybody's having a great time. We had Halloween last night, but you know, safety is always important in our homes, and we want to talk about a couple of things. First of all, we want to talk about that fire that happened out in the Los Flores, which is, I guess, just outside of Mission Viejo. And that was a home fire, right?
Yeah, it was about 1:10 in the morning, and the fire started in the garage. And a lot of people do not have smoke alarms in their garage. So unfortunately, the residents, they were sleeping, they smelled smoke, and they got up and they were just looking for where the fire was.
And you think it's in the home usually.
Right, and so it took a little bit for them to come outside the house to a side door, and as soon as they opened the door, they saw the fire in the garage.
Right.
And if there was a smoke alarm in that garage, it would have alerted them a lot quicker. They would have been able to call 911 sooner, and we would have got there a lot quicker.
Now, are smoke alarms in the garage, are they the same as the one you might have in your home? Because I would imagine it would need to be a little bit louder so you could hear it? Or
smoke alarms are loud. You could hear it.
They are
because
loud.
What happened was one of the neighbors even eventually heard a smoke alarm and thought it was in their house.
Wow.
So because you could smell some smoke, and I mean, this was a significant fire. Our firefighters did an outstanding job of keeping this fire contained to the garage and to just the front part of the house. And this was a 3,500 square foot home.
Wow.
And they did an outstanding job. And again, this is 1:10 in the morning, and they got there quickly. And unfortunately, there were 2 cars in the garage. They were a total loss, and there were 2 cars on the driveway.
Is that a fire that will kind of smolder for a while and then finally spark because they were doing some work in the garage, or was it an electrical fire?
No, the most probable cause was an electrical malfunction of some sort.
Right.
And so basically you could see drywall does a great job of containing a fire to the area. However, when it extends into the attic, or if there's any holes or spaces where the air, that the fire could extend through, the fire extends.
Right. Wow. Well, that's why it's so important to have people check their smoke detectors. And right now is a great time to do that. As we say, you know, we're falling back with the daylight savings time. It's a great time to go around and just change them. Do you recommend that they just change the batteries even though they think they might be working still?
Typically, we tell people to at least check the batteries once a month. Some of the newer brands coming out have the 10-year lithium batteries in them. The smoke alarms typically are only good for about 10 years. And most of them have a date on the device itself that you're going to want to check as well. Especially some of the older homes, you want to make sure that you're constantly checking them. Just because it starts when you test it doesn't mean the sensor is going to continuously work.
Right.
So replacing that using one of the 10-year batteries doesn't mean you can't check it, but you do still need to.
You know, carbon monoxide alarms, are they still, you know, are they now required in new homes, or are they required in old homes?
Yeah, they're required 1 per floor.
1 per floor, okay. So
And
that's
then
important to have too.
Right, and then smoke alarms are required in the hallways, on each level, and then in every bedroom.
Wow.
But again, Orange County Fire Authority is recommending a smoke alarm in every garage as well.
Right. Now, before we get on to the next subject of home safety and home fires, we wanted to bring up real quickly the water safety program that the Orange County Fire Authority has. We've had multiple drownings in Orange County here this year, and yet you had one even just recently, a month ago in Villa Park, I believe.
Right, it was probably even a couple weeks ago. So Judy Radar, she keeps the stats for the entire county, and she sent me this last night, and in it, it's sad. We've already had, since January 1st of this year, 66 drowning calls. Of those 66, 30 of them have been fatal.
Nearly half.
Nearly half, and what is sad to say is 15 of those fatal drownings are people 55 or older.
Wow.
And you wouldn't think of that. You think a lot of drownings occur in pools and
Small
backyard
children.
spas and in bathtubs, but a lot of times people swim alone. And that's unfortunate, because if something does happen, if you have a medical emergency, there's nobody there to help you.
Right. Yeah, so it's so important that even if in the ocean especially, and even if people snorkel or dive, we always say, always swim with a friend. But really that's true in your own home as well. At least, you know, have a neighbor or have somebody, you know, nearby that can, you know, if something does happen, that they can get some assistance for you. So it's super important, especially for our community, you know, when we have grandkids who come and visit. And some of the pools here are a little bit larger, so we got to make sure we keep an eye on them. And everybody's so distracted with these phones now that you just, you know, see them doing that. And That's all it takes is a couple of seconds for a child to go underwater.
And we see that, just like with cooking fires and children that drown, it's the unintended, for just a split second. They get distracted by the phone, somebody comes to the door, they answer the phone. It only takes seconds for somebody to drown.
Right, that'd be misery for everybody forever.
Forever.
Yeah. Well, you want to talk about cooking fires, and that's a big problem too, especially in our community, I think, because a lot of people, you know, they cook for themselves, and like we just said, they'll get distracted either watching a program or someone at the door, and next thing you know, you've left something on the stove on for way too long. You have some advice for us regarding home safety and cooking fires.
I do. The biggest thing for us is that we respond almost every 3 days, at least to one fire, and most of those have been about $10,000 or more a month.
Wow.
Is what's happening. So, and it can happen to anyone in our department. In fact, it's happened to us. We have family and friends, but you want to make sure you're standing by your pan. Unattended cooking is the #1 cause of fires. This year's a demonstration that we have. We've been doing lately to really show that you can just put out a fire that's contained to a pot with just a lid. It's amazing, and
That's all it took.
that's all it takes,
Yeah.
you know, and really all you're trying to do in this particular situation is to get close enough to the fire to be able to turn off the ignition source, which would be the dial, and get out of the house. Get out, call 911. Just because you've done this, leave it alone. Whatever you do, do not pour water on a fire at all, especially in the kitchen, because you don't know if there's any type of grease runoff. What you'll see if you show the video a little bit further is actually water on a fire, and it's amazing what happens, the billow of smoke that comes out. Now, this particular demonstration we're showing, you'll take notice there's no cabinets above it. Now, if you had cabinets above here, it would actually force that flame and fire out on top of you.
Wow.
It's amazing.
And that was water going into
That
the flame?
was that was simply a 1/4 cup of oil with about a 1/2 cup to a cup of water.
Yeah.
So it's extremely dangerous, and that's what we want people to pay attention
And
to.
you remember back in the old days too, we always had the paper towel racks, and they
Yes.
always seemed to be practically on top of the stove. And now you think about it, like, that is a great source for heat and fire, and then boom, the cabinets go up, next thing you know, the house goes up.
Right, and we want people to pay attention that just because you have an electric stove, they're just as dangerous. In fact, we're having more fires with electric stoves than we are gas. And you know, checking your oven for storage. A lot of older adults are downsizing after the kids leave for college or whatever they're going to do. They just don't have the space that they used to have, so they're using their ovens for storage. We really encourage you to open up that oven just before you turn it on, and just make sure that even one of your grandkids hasn't put one of their toys in there.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people use that as an extra cabinet.
Exactly.
And then they forget whatever happened to be in there. Next thing you have a source again.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, what do you recommend? You know, obviously we have a fire on the stove. You know, you don't want to use water, which I think is people's first instinct.
It is,
Is it baking soda or something like that?
You know, you can, but you really need 3 large boxes of baking soda in order to put that out.
That's not going to happen.
It's okay. We don't recommend flour or things like that. Those are highly combustible, meaning that they'll just encourage the fire to grow. The first thing would be, if you can, use the lid to to at least be able to get over to the ignition source and turn it off. The other thing to do is really just to back away and get out of your home. The fire grows so rapidly that even going for the extinguisher that's out in the hallway, by the time you get back, it's going to be bigger than you even can imagine.
Right.
So just taking that precaution. There are products out on the market right now that we want people to be aware of that can help with those types of things. So if you decide to use an extinguisher, take it out of the box, play around with it, meaning at least carry it.
Yeah.
Feel how
it.
heavy it. Well, feel how heavy it is. Realize where the pen is. You're not going to have time to read the instructions on the outside of the device.
Right.
There's also other types of devices that are motion censored that will actually shut off a stove if you're away from it too long. There's canisters that hide up underneath your hood system that act as an extinguisher if you are walking away. It pops like a little can and extinguishes it for you. Right. So there's things out there that you can use.
And especially those fire extinguishers too, everybody kind of just starts waving them around. You really want them to focus on the base of the fire, I believe.
You brought one.
I did,
Oh,
actually. Yeah, let me show you this. Here is Kidda's newest fire extinguisher. This particular one is specifically for residential use in a kitchen. What they've done with this one, it has more of an arc. So what happens is if this particular one no longer has the pin that's here, that would be the safety to hold this.
Right.
But as you're holding it and you're pulling the pin, if you have a regular extinguisher, stand back from it and then move forward as you're sweeping for it. Mostly, especially if it's grease, you're going to splatter the grease if you get too close with it. People think that they can just get on top of it and put it out. It won't. It just makes the fire
So you
move
should back
everywhere.
up about 3 or 4
Step
feet.
back 3 or 4 feet,
Yeah.
and then slowly sweep as you're going towards it and get a little bit closer. And again, this really is just so that you can get close enough to the stove to turn it off.
Right.
And if you're not comfortable with it, you know your abilities. Just get out and stay out.
Right.
Call 911. We'd be more than happy, even if it's just a small little stove fire, to come out and make sure it hasn't extended up through the hood system or into the attic.
That's what I was going to ask you. So obviously, our average age is closer to 70, a little bit older even. How difficult is it to engage that trigger? Is it pretty easy, like a water bottle, or is it,
It's a little stiffer than
depends on
that.
the
It depends on
manufacturer?
the manufacturer. But again, that's why we recommend people just to take them out. A lot of people I hear say, oh, it's in my pantry or underneath the sink.
Right.
Picture yourself having a fire behind you in your stove. In my kitchen, my oven is actually behind me, so it would be too dangerous for me to reach underneath my stove with my back to the fire.
Right. And we just had a fire, I believe, a couple of months ago in one of our units, and that, luckily some people happened to be driving by and saved them.
Well, like Teri said, cooking fires happen once every 3 days in Orange County. And I have the stats from September. This is dollar loss. And cooking is one of the top ones, $625,000 from cooking fires in just 1 month for damage. I mean, that is significant.
Right.
And another thing is loose clothing. A lot of times when you're cooking, when somebody has loose clothing, it gets too close to the fire and you could catch on fire. So we
Right.
just need to be real careful when we cook.
Yeah, those aprons look nice, but a lot of
Right.
them are pretty flammable, so be careful with that as well. Well, we want to thank you very much. Very important information. Not only, is important with water safety. We have many pools here in our community, but obviously, cooking fires are a hazard to anyone. And we encourage people to visit your website, OCFA.org, and get some more information. Or they also have a really good website too called ReadySetGoOC.org, and those are great, resources for people to look at and get some good information, especially when you have grandkids that might be visiting for the holidays. You don't want to ruin those holidays with moments with leaving the cake or the pumpkin pie on too long or something like that. Thanks so much for joining us on the program
Thank
today.
you for having us.
Well, that'll do it for our program today for this day. It is November 1st, so we're off here to November, and we do encourage you to turn back your clocks on Sunday. Remember to turn them back either on Saturday evening or when you wake up on Sunday, and that way you won't miss any of those important functions. Well, we thank you for joining us on the program, and have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next time.